Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, we'll have a very light sort of comedy session. We'll talk about executive pathology, some very serious executive diseases, certifiable professionals within your industry, and we'll set up a clinic at about 5:30 this afternoon in the foyer for those of you who want to relax. I've been given 20 minutes, and therefore you'll be very grateful that it'll be over soon. You may well ask what I'm doing here as a psychologist on a program that is so mechanistic and being in the quantifiable sciences, and yet you've invited me, and you are very kind doing so. On previous occasions where I did meet some of you, we spoke about the whole issue of work-life balance and integration. We contemplated the fact that this is the most fabulous building ever designed. We even referred to it as a temple. And I work in the area of human demolition, the collapse of this fantastic structure and how to prevent it. At the risk of being arrogant, I've seen just over 27,000 executives in counseling and therapy throughout my career, and they inform me, they're the authors, they're the speakers, and my job is to conduit that message in a narrative format on a wonderful occasion like this, when you do foregather and you concentrate on how to establish these fantastic structures and to ensure that they are safe. I probably fit best into health and safety, and in that particular domain I'll claim my relevance for this afternoon. I work in the discipline of sadness. I work with people who are unwell. I've seen one individual in my career who came to me and paid fees because he was excessively happy. And I certified him, and then I treated him. But seriously, there is an issue out there that is pandemic, and that is that executives, in other words, us, people who are blessed with talent and potential and capacity, have become, to some extent, a generation and a discipline of sadness. If I could work 25 hours a day and see people like us, and I'm one of them, then I wouldn't have sufficient hours. The issue that I'm proposing and that I'm putting before you, ladies and gentlemen, is that work-life balance and work-life integration is the one subject in which we did not get straight A's. In fact, it never featured on our syllabi and on our disciplines. It is the one area that we handle well after the so-called collapse and the disintegration of the superstructure. Executive encounter is interesting. I don't do coaching and counseling and therapy and mentoring with executives like ourselves anymore. We've done those things. And I quote my dear friend Gary Kirsten, the coach of our national cricket side. When I had to assess him for the job, I said to him, "How will you coach the Proteas?" And he said, "Not at all." I said, "Well, you're here for the interview and we've got some money to pay you. Why are you here?" And he said, "At the level, you don't coach people to play cricket. They can play cricket. Hopefully when I'm done with them, they'll be better human beings." How do we reconstruct this particular entity, this building? Being the finest building that one can think of, and its perfection is beyond doubt, why would modern people like myself inflict these cracks into this design and precipitate it towards the area of demise and injury? Why would we do that? We are in an era of modernity, there's no question about it. We are all 2013 models, we are current. But we are also in an era where we can outsource everything. In other words, we engage in the process of surrogacy. Everything we can do. We can have people clean our pools and cut our lawn, but we can also have other people raise our children. I'll give you 2 examples on the continuum. Our life expectancy is 76. That's calculated by actuaries and not the medical profession. Actuaries know our price. That's why they know exactly how old we will become. And I've accepted that at 76. And perhaps just a bit of a philosophy that goes with that, or an emotion. I'm 66 years old, and I've claimed the 76. That means I've got 10 years left, and that's fine, but I need 50 to finish my business. And the tragedy is it's going to happen in this body. That's the problem. That is a bit sad. So I've got to get serious about time. And on that note, I've brought 3 books with a title that I've written on It's About Time, and your conference organizers can hand those out to whoever qualifies. Two points on the continuum. Every year I get one of my students to engage in a study which we call the corporate kids, our children, the school leavers. And what we're interested in is to establish what their disposition, if not predisposition, is towards the world of work, the work ethic we bring home, if we get home. And we play with the kids. We don't do empirical research. We glean, we play, we observe, we integrate, we reach consensus, we corroborate observations, and we publish. More about that some other day. But on one occasion, and I will always allude to this case, a young boy is nominated by the group to do the thank you, and he duly gets up and he says, "Sir, I've been asked by the group to thank you." And I say, "Well, go ahead." And he says, "I've elected not to thank you." And I say to him, "Well, we're out of here." And he says, "Please, not yet, sir. May I please leave you with an instruction?" And I say, "Go ahead." And I quote verbatim. And he says, "Sir, will you please tell our parents that they owe us more than their wealth and their absence?" And at the other extreme of the continuum of time, at any one time, ladies and gentlemen, I have in excess of 12 couples in the age group 60 and older in therapy contemplating divorce. Who are they? They're us. They are the sophisticated people with talent and qualifications and success, and they are recognized. I will always quote one couple, and if I mentioned their names, you would know them. So they're elegant, they have finesse, they are known, they are apparent, and they are prominent. Bear in mind that they were just after the Second World War, so who were they, from what extract and what particular heritage? So they're sitting with me, having consolidated everything, closed careers and finished off. And the husband turns to the wife and starts the purge of guilt. And amongst others, he says to her, "Sorry that you were a single parent with a husband. Apologies for all the times I was away. I enjoyed it. I'd never flown first class. I liked it. Sorry about all the secretaries that threatened you." She called them secretaries. Sorry about being a single parent, but not only in that regard, but also coping and then me interfering. Apologies for our fraught sex life. And continues all the admissions until she stops him, turns to me and asks, "How long does this take?" And I obviously say, "It takes as long as it takes." "Why do you ask?" She says, "This is Monday, and I play bowls at 10 o'clock. And he says, "I'll join you for lunch at 1 in Rosebank." They're Johannesburg people. And she says, "Thank you so much, but for 26 years, lunch on a Monday has been with the book reading guild." He says, "I'll buy you tea at 3. And she says, "Sorry, that's with the gardening club." And then opens her diary and flashes it and says, "This has been my survival kit. And in your absence it worked. And now that you threatened with nothing, you want to usurp me again. I'm not prepared to die twice." And then they get divorced and they're not angry. The point I'm making is this. We're busy being successful. We're engaged in being professional. We're building this construction, this entity that we're busy with called a career, and in which we obviously inculcate this mentality and work ethic of dedication and devotion to duty. And just imagine ushering in a youth that's cynical about our model and ushering out a career that's sadly not free. And in between those 2 points on the continuum is us. That's where I am. And the question that I ask of you and of myself is, as much as you have all the preconditions, the statutory interventions. I happened to sit in on the session just before lunch, and all the precautionary legislation and the interventions, and to get rid of corruption and all those things. Where's the charter that regulates well-being? Who's ever done those plans? How do you quantify the seemingly inevitable process of personal collapse or the potential thereof? 2 examples. A friend of mine, quantity surveyor, walks into my rooms in absolute distress, in anguish, actually throws a patient out and says, I must see this man now. I thought it's cancer or infidelity of his wife or anything. He looked like trouble. And of course I inquire what it is, and I'm skipping a bit of the preamble, but he eventually says this to me: I have just discovered, and he was 55, I've just discovered that I became my qualifications. I've never been me. And then I say, who are you? And he was actually quite funny. He said, I must engage in the science of shade. I said, what's that? He said, I've got to plant trees. I need to buy a farm with a plantation. And then he does buy a farm in Leidenburg and becomes himself at a mature age. But there was one precursor, and that is he could afford his freedom. I met somebody not so long ago who said to me, and as much as it sounds like the inverse of logic, if not an oxymoron, he said to me, I've become very good at being unhappy. And then when we dissected the statement, as sad as it is, he said to me, I work too hard. I'm hardly ever at home. I've collapsed my family. I've disconnected from my wonderful children. And I'm in this job, and I love it. Just a last example. In our research which we've done, and it's an indictment of a kind, but on the other hand, it's certainly commendable. But in South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, the typical executive, which means you and I, at the age of 50, that's after 30 years of work, we will have spent 10 years overtime for free. That's the rate in which we volunteer our own demise, where we are prepared to do what is not asked for and then blame the employer as the villain, and they never asked for it. Why do we do it? Why do we, in fact, surrender that quest for a balanced, integrated lifestyle willingly and then criticize somebody who was never guilty? I've left you a note in the foyer, a one-pager. I don't do anything more than a one-pager. People don't read it. But in the form of a roadmap which you may consider as an agenda for your own introspective assessment as you relate to this structure and its conditionality. And I've isolated just a few pointers from it, and I don't want to preempt your homework. But I will tell you this, that only 17% of all the people I've worked with and currently work with have engaged in any form of reform. Anything that makes it better and introduces the balance that I'm purporting this afternoon. But the people who come right, as it were, in simple parlance, typically do that most dramatically because of an experience of adversity. It's amazing how clever people become within the notion of if you lose, you learn. You don't get the CEO job. A relationship collapses, and at the risk of being personal, you get divorced and you find out the depth of regret. You lose a child or whatever it is. Let's not go to the somber aspects. But then people wisen up. And so often people say, I'm just in time to be too late. The question that I put to people when I work with them, and I'm just one of them myself, is just this: the life you're busy with, are you living it or are you being lived? Are you in corporate conscription or are you free? Do your qualifications and your success and your stature, your opulence and your wealth liberate you, or are you actually in this corporate prison? And when that is true, we often choke by the very essence of it, and you know what it is more success. In your little pamphlet, you'll note only one point that's bold, and that is enough. If we can define enough, we know exactly what its constituent ingredients are. If you're in quest for money or wealth forever, and its insatiable nature, then obviously you're living a tentative life. You'll never have enough. If I don't have enough spouse in my partner, then I will supplement it with an extramarital relationship. If I don't have enough self-esteem, then my inferiority will present itself in the form of arrogance. It's useful to know what is enough. Or as my dad used to say in the Afrikaner household, enough is enough now. Do you remember the sound? And the detail wasn't spelled out, but the consequence pretty sure. Just 2 more and then I'm done. When last did you authenticate yourself and present the real authentic you to you? And let's stay with the profession, the job you're in, and the conference you're attending. Is it good inside here? Does it add enduring value? Perhaps in lofted parlance, is your ontology, your sense of being, agreeable with your hopes? And perhaps those dreams, is whatever they are, and is it rewarding? Or are you living a replicative lifestyle? We call them calendar caricatures. Tomorrow is just today, 12 hours later. All that changes is the date. How do you restore the building? I've left you a few notes outside. For those of you who get the book, have a read. There's something in there. I believe that the reconstruction is an urgency. And as much as it might be pandemic in certain spheres, I don't believe it's ICU stuff yet. But by goodness, there is a sense of urgency, and I would suggest that preventive maintenance is a good thing. Find out what it constitutes. If it's a project in self-care, I believe it's a good one. If you need to find the equipment, find it, but do it timeously. I close with a story that changed me in terms of freedom. I listened to the story recounted by a Captain Gerald Coffey, who was a pilot in the Vietnamese War, shot down over Hanoi and placed in prison for 7 years. And the isolation was so absolute that he wasn't aware for a year that there was 1,000 of his buddies in the same prison. And there was absolute no contact, no communal showers, nothing. The size of his cell was 6 foot by 6 foot by 8 foot, the size of a bed. And through some form of diffusion through the mortar, he'd established there are my buddies here. And being a man of rank, he decided, CEO, I've got to connect with people here. So through innovation, ignited by adversity, he developed what he called tap code. He took the 26 letters of the alphabet, and a C and a K assumed the same phonetic sound, so he had a matrix of 5 by 5. And so he could communicate. So an A was row 1, letter 1, and a B was. It took him a year to teach his neighbor, this is not sound, this is language. This is intimacy, this is touch, this is love. And another 2 years to diffuse throughout that building. And he taught just 3 letters, GBA. And a few years later, at sunset every day, ringing through that prison was God bless America, and not one prisoner died. And when Kissinger and Nixon received them back, they vindicated his story, and obviously, as they would, wanted to tour this man, son of the soil, preach to the nation, and he refused that. Up to the point where they said, well, what is the message? What is the learning? What's the offering? What's the brand value of this endurance? And this is the point that I make. He just said, I had to go into this prison, and I had to spend some time in here to discover what is right and what is wrong for me. And by God, I know the difference. Question, are you enslaved within your own success? Will we deploy into the hearts and minds of the youth that will replace us? What will you say at that very threshold when it's done? Will you embrace something and somebody of meaning, or might it be a disappointment? I wish you a good conference.